Hey there folks, welcome back to the channel. So we're going to do a little Sunday video tonight, and this one just comes about because I'm going to do a little bit of around the hobby thing, but realistically it's one specific story that I wanted to talk about a little bit, just because it was brought to my attention, and I want to give thanks to Wax to the Future on Instagram, who passed along an article as well as a couple of stories related to this specific story that I'm going to cover in a moment, and links to everything will be included in the description, so I will make sure to include that for you. I'll include an article that outlines a little bit of it as well as videos, so I'll get to that in a second, and it is of course in the title. But I want to talk a little bit about Logan Paul's purchase case of Pokemon. Now, real quick, before I continue, you may be asking, well, you're a sports card channel and you've shown no inclination of anything related to Pokemon. Why are you talking about it? Well, the biggest reason for it, honestly, is that I think it does have some pertinence as far as the trading card hobby is concerned. You're right. Personally, I don't collect Pokemon, not particularly concerned with it, but anything pertaining to the trading card hobby as a whole does have impact on different things. And there is, of course, the element of it related to the third-party authenticator involved, since their reach goes beyond the Pokemon realm. So I'll get to that in just a second. But before I do, as always, I put on here the Instagram. You can always follow me here, and if you want to message me or send anything that way as far as information, because when it comes to stuff like this, a lot of times I try to pay attention to as much stuff as I can, but obviously something like in the Pokemon realm, I'm not really going to be paying attention to it that closely. And it is really nice when someone can bring it to my attention. Although it is good that also some other content creators in the space have also started to put some stuff out there, and I'll shout some of them out as well, and maybe include some of the links in the description for that additionally. But this is the Instagram, and that's where you can reach me. So real quick, before I get into the story that I'm going to focus on, I do want to shout out quickly a collaboration. I was on video here with Andy, Sports Card Investigator, and I'll include a link to that in the description. He and I chat for a little over an hour related to Black Swan events, the Infinite Content Creator Loop, one of my favorite topics, and then a couple of different topics related to the hobby. It was a fun conversation. Andy, as always, is great, and he's always welcome to come on the channel, and I was very happy that he invited me to join him on his channel to discuss. So that'll be in the description if you want to check it out. Next here, I'm going to move to CardPorn, who actually discussed this topic a little bit earlier today. And I'll also give credit to Dustin, Personal Finance Dad, who had a video on this that gave some of the basic parameters. And then I'm going to take a lot of what they did and I'm going to expand upon it as well. But CardPorn does do an excellent job here outlining some of the key pieces, showing you some video clips, and then outlining some of the components that relate to it. The biggest reason I think a lot of folks are paying attention to it is because, it's a $3.5 million case of Pokemon. So the big dollars are going to draw a lot of attention, but there's a lot of little elements to it that may expand the concern about it beyond just the basic, just the Pokemon realm. And as you can see here, here's the example of that sealed case from Logan Paul. And as you can see, it is authenticated by Baseball Card Exchange. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But the point is that there's some different elements to it. So this post by CardPorn is great in the sense that it gives you some basic information, a breakdown, and some stuff to go off of. But we're going to expand upon that, and I want to talk about it a little bit more. Now, next here is going to be one of two videos that I'm going to highlight. Everything, like I said, is going to be in the description for you, so you can definitely check it out there. It is from a YouTuber named Rattle Pokemon, who does two videos related to this. So this is the first one in which he's questioning whether it's authentic or not, and talked about a lot of different things. Now, if you do check out these videos, be aware of something. He is not aware. He doesn't have much background or understanding about the whole baseball card exchange thing and kind of the standing it has in the authentication space in sports cards. So a lot of it is kind of entertaining if you do watch it in that context, because he's kind of like, who is this Steve Hart? I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically, who is this Steve Hart? Why is who would send him anything to authenticate? Well, in the sports card space, people do, so we're a little bit more aware of it. But the important thing is he does raise a couple of red flags and a couple of questions in this video, and then there's a subsequent video in which he elaborates on it some more, and that's this one right here. This is proof that Logan Paul's Pokemon First Edition base set isn't authentic. So this is only 4 days after the previous one. And as you can see from the bottom of the screen there, it's already at 22, almost 23,000 views. It has gone a little bit viral as far as that space is concerned. And he does actually go into a tremendous amount of detail. So the first one is kind of outlining a couple of the red flags at the basic level. And then the second one goes into even more detail. And I do recommend that at the very least, watch the second one of these if you do have the time to do so. It's 42 minutes, so I understand it's a longer video. But he does go into a lot more detail about some of the issues with the tape, with the label. And he actually does a little bit more digging into kind of issues that pertain around that. And it's important because when it comes to authenticating sealed wax boxes, wax cases, wax packs, it's a lot of these authentication things are an inexact science, But when we're trying to figure out if a card has been altered, there's certain things we can look for that are a lot more straightforward. You can just examine the card itself and be done with it. But in the case of something like a sealed Pokemon case or sealed case of product in general, you've got a couple of different things you're looking at, because unless you were at the factory and we're seeing what they were using, what they were doing, what the boxes should look like, what the labels should look like, what kind of labels should look like, you're missing a lot of information. And there are some important caveats for baseball card exchange that are important to note. Baseball card exchange, as I said earlier today, in this video, sorry, it is already kind of considered to be a trusted source in this. Now, obviously, I know a variety of different folks in the sports card space who have been around the game a long time, and they've had their questions about baseball card exchange, and that's not going to be the point of my bringing it up in this video. I'm just going to say that nobody's infallible, but in the case of authenticating this kind of product, it is problematic that realistically there's only one de facto source for the authentication. And the problem is, if they don't know something and there's really no other sources for authentication, it's different than it is in something like third-party grading in sports cards. If you don't like the way PSA does their business, you can go to SGC. If you don't like the way they do their business, you can go to BGS. If you don't like that, you can go to something like a CSG. I wouldn't go any further below that surface after that, but the point is you've got 3 or 4 options depending on how you perceive it, and I'd be reasonably comfortable sending to any of them because at least most of them have had a longer track record, and they've at least got the backing of some authenticators who at least have had a little bit of history in the hobby. When we're talking about Steve Hart and Baseball Card Exchange, yes, they have had a long standing doing this in the hobby, but they're the only game in town, so to speak. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more in a second. But in the second video, part of it is covering this little piece right here, where he sent an email to Steve Hart and got a reply back. And this is all fairly recent. If you can see it on, make it out on the screen, this is December 26th. So we're only one day after Christmas here. It's not that long ago. So he says, we do not have a guarantee for authentication/wrapping. That said, all the other third-party grading companies don't or no longer do. We do the best we can and rarely have had a problem in 10 years we've been doing this. The biggest issue is that when someone has come forward and claimed there's an issue and wanted a guarantee, it turns out they were the ones committing the fraud, trying to get me to hand them over some money. Now, may come as a surprise to some folks who are familiar with baseball card exchange, but, not just taking this at face value, I've done business with baseball card exchange before, and I want to make clear that I'm in the space that I know that there's some stuff that I know is particularly difficult to authenticate that I would still be wary, even if Baseball Card Exchange said it was okay. To me, it's not carte blanche that they say to give the thumbs up, because there's a lot of nuances that I understand. Even though I don't claim to be able to authenticate packs or boxes myself, I understand the sheer difficulty of it because I do have context for that. And knowing that, it means that the possibility of making a mistake is rather high. It's an inexact science at best. But going to the Baseball Card Exchange site themselves, purchases that I've made in the past, now at this point many years ago because the prices were much lower, was predominantly for junk wax and things that I really don't have too much concern over. But if you open up some stuff and you see that you're getting less of the star players than you might expect, then you can always put that into question. That it was not my experience, but at the same time I was buying junk wax. So the likelihood of me having an issue with that was much lower, so I had much less concerns. Now, this is important because this was, and I'll include a link to this as well. This is their authentication page, and they gave a most recent update based on a lot of things going on with the pandemic and all that, which is important. Now, there's a couple of pieces here that I do want to bring to your attention. Now, scrolling down, I'm going to use a little editing magic here because I had to find the exact piece I wanted. So this is important. The number one here is very critical. It says any and all factory sealed cases, so that pertains to this story, that need to be wrapped can still be submitted. If a case is worth $100,000 or the case is worth $100, go ahead and ship it here. Factory sealed cases can be processed quickly, as all I need to do is verify that they were originally sealed. This is critically important. All I need to do is verify that they were originally sealed. So this is one of the key points that is brought up in the videos that I highlighted a little bit earlier, in that really it's a cardboard box with a piece of tape that's sealed on the outside, and all they're doing is really just confirming that it is a sealed case or a sealed box. The problem is the tape correct? Is the label on the outside correct? Or is the boxes inside of it what's supposed to be inside of this box? And we don't know, because based on what they need to do in order to process this via their own website here, like I said, I'm quoting the BBC Exchange website itself, they really only need to verify that it's originally sealed. And as long as they're satisfied that the case is in fact sealed, then they'll throw the wrapping on top of it and put their label on top, and we're done. And now it's considered authenticated. The questionable provenance, which is covered in the videos that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, the second video covers a lot more detail about the case itself. If you're interested about the questionable provenance, then I would recommend checking out the first video. So that'll give you a little bit more background. But the questionable provenance of it would immediately set off alarm bells. It would immediately make you wonder, wait a minute, something seems a little bit off about this. When people reached out to the original seller that originally had this, there were conflicting stories. There was a lot of stuff going on there. And the problem is now we're a couple of sales past that original owner. So the further we get from it, the more difficult it becomes to ascertain what happened with the provenance. And now it's inside of a baseball card exchange seal. It gave it a certain amount of authenticity and a certain amount of trust as far as the hobby is concerned, which is problematic when really we only have one authenticator in the space. And if you don't believe me pertaining to that, I'll scroll down a little bit further here into this one, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. So right here, most people already know, but BBCE is the one who authenticates all the packs for PSA. So if you talk about PSA and authentication, well, actually, that's Baseball Card Exchange as well. And right here, Steve Hart, the owner of Baseball Card Exchange, is the hobby's foremost authenticator of unopened vintage wax packs and boxes. He's the only pack authenticator PSA has ever had. So it's kind of it all roads lead to Steve Hart and Baseball Card Exchange. So a lot of that is kind of problematic. Now, everything I've said, again, I'm not going to concern myself or accuse anybody of anything, but this is important. All paths lead to Steve Hart and Baseball Card Exchange because they're the authenticator du jour. They're it as far as the authentication game is for this sealed product. But there's something critically important. If I send something to PSA and it turns out it was tampered with or something done, there's a guarantee in place. This is critically important here. Going further down, right here under number 7, because if you look here, they've got these things under authentication still sticking onto the same website that we just talked about. Number 7, after the submission and authentication of an item by Baseball Card Exchange, new information may arise or become available that was unavailable at the time a determination of authenticity was assigned by Baseball Card Exchange to any item. Baseball Card Exchange shall have no liability to customer, and Baseball Card Exchange shall be under no obligation to change a determination of authenticity assigned to an item unless such an item is resubmitted for authentication to the extent new information arises or becomes available after a determination of authenticity is assigned by Baseball Card Exchange to any item. That is a very roundabout way of saying there is no guarantee and no warranty. If something turns out to be wrong after the fact, there is no obligation to change the authenticity. So if they claimed it's authentic in the first place, they're not required to change their opinion on it unless it's resubmitted for authentication. But if they weren't able to determine if something was inauthentic the first time, it would be difficult to believe that they would be able to determine it's inauthentic the second time, given that the amount of expertise is something that is in question. And that was one of the points brought up in the videos, is that by their own admission, they don't have necessarily the long standing. So in sports cards, you can make the argument they've handled a lot of cases and wax packs and boxes. Some people would argue not so much, not enough to be able to be in the standing of authority they have. I'm going to leave it at that. But even then, inside of the sports card space, it's easier to be more comfortable, only because they've had so many cases and boxes and packs through their hands over the years. In the Pokemon realm, they have not had nearly as much experience. And a lot of the conversations related about, oh, this is the first time they've sealed a case and done this, that, and the other thing. A lot of firsts. And, it makes it very historic. But along with the questionable provenance, it brings into question whether they were the right people to authenticate this case in the first place, as opposed to some of the high-end collectors who maybe have handled a lot more of this stuff in the original run-through. The other component of it is, honestly, like I said, we're a couple of sales into it. And one of the things that brings into the space as well is that you have Mealy Pops, who was one of the dealers who was involved in one portion of this deal. So obviously they have a stake in making sure that everybody feels that everything's on the up and up and it's all good. At the end of the day, Logan Paul's the one sitting with the bag with 3.5 million worth of questions. And from what I understand, I believe they're going to go and potentially open it up to take a look at what's inside in order to try to determine the authenticity of it. And we'll have to see what happens from there. And that's going to be the continuation of the story. But the overarching point here that I'm trying to make is that this is a space that still has a little bit of a Wild West element to it, because it is an inexact science. Even if you kind of know what you're looking for, even if you've handled a lot of packs, a lot of boxes, and a lot of that, it becomes very difficult to put a full amount of stock into your ability to authenticate it. The reality is also that even the ones that are the supposed experts on this don't necessarily have the experience to be able to do that authentication. And when we put blind faith into it, that's where you run into a little bit of a problem, especially when there were red flags and red flags all throughout the transaction. A lot of people just kind of got greedy and then started playing hot potato with it. That is mostly my opinion, but it is an opinion that is shared a little bit in some of the discussion that I've seen around this particular case. So to me, it goes beyond the headline. It's not enough to say that, Logan Paul bought 3.5 million. There's some questions about it. It's that the chain of events that led to Logan Paul getting into it is also problematic. It is problematic the fact that the original owner of this, whomever they were suspicious to begin with. It is concerning that people stayed away from it in the original time they tried to sell it on eBay. Why would you try to sell something like that on eBay when there's so much more potential? Something like a Golden Auctions or one of these other auction houses would certainly be happy to take that kind of thing if there weren't red flags and questions in the first place. A lot of the mechanisms that would have protected people from being able to buy into this weren't in place. Nobody was allowed to look inside the case. And most importantly, is a system, and this extends also into sports cards. I have a little bit of concern with a system where, by your own acknowledgement, you are only going to look, if something is considered to be a sealed product, you're only going to basically confirm that the seal is in place. It's understandable because at the end of the day, if you open the seal in order to look at what's inside, you have now tampered with the seal and it is no longer a sealed product. So I do understand that. But it is one of those things where it's like from Seven, if you guys remember the movie, what's in the box? And the question we have here, a $3.5 million question is, what is in the box? And that's kind of what makes it a little bit interesting. But like I said, I will leave links to all of this in the description for you. At this moment in time, we don't know what the end result of this is going to be, but it is an interesting story. It does go beyond the Pokemon card realm because, like I said, Baseball Card Exchange is a big player in the authentication space in general. And hopefully you got at least a bit of a better understanding that they don't really have any warranties related to their authentication portion of it. So, bear that in mind. And they are technically the only authenticator out there that is considered to be used by PSA and by anybody else right now. And nobody's really guaranteeing anything in that space. So do take this unopened stuff with a bit of a grain of salt. A lot of people look at it as a potential investment, and understandably so, because obviously as the stuff gets opened, it becomes rarer and tougher to come by. But it's not without its own pitfalls and potential dangers, and that is something worth keeping an eye on. At the same time, it is also important to establish provenance with stuff like this, because then and only then can you at least feel a little bit more of a comfort level in understanding what it is you're getting into. As long as you're going into it with eyes wide open as a consumer, then fair enough, so be it, if you can accept that risk. But some interesting things that were brought up in this one. I did want to chat about it a little bit and give some thoughts. We'll have to see how this plays out. If you were somebody who's looking to deal with Baseball Card Exchange, like I said, just be cognizant, be wary. My dealings with them have been okay. But again, I don't buy anything super high end or super expensive. So most of the stuff I've purchased, I haven't had too much issue with. And I've at least handled in my, earlier on in my collecting career so that I can at least feel some comfort in knowing that if I feel something is off, I'm willing to challenge it. But obviously the bigger dollars we get into, the more difficult it becomes to do that. So I can't blame anybody for looking for a resource to trust and then potentially being taken, because it is a very difficult thing to do to authenticate these things, and that needs to be fully understood. Anyway, that's it for this time around. As always, if you've got any questions or comments, I would love to hear them in the comments section. I'll reply back to them as soon as I can. We'll be back with more videos and things going on the channel. We'll do the live stream as always next Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And that's it for me. First official video of the new year, new fresh video. Happy 2022 to everybody. Happy New Year. And we'll catch you in the next one.